program is part of the Scene Project's podcast network. The Scene Project features interviews with independent musicians, comedians, and artists from across the Midwest. Become part of our community and support local art wherever you are. Welcome into another exciting episode of Real Biz. I am your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today is founder of Ms. World Traveler, Kerry Damiano. Kerry, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here, Bubba.
I'm excited to have you. I commented early on that you showed up looking exactly like your headshot, and I'm not quite used to that. But you absolutely lovely, and we're going to have a great conversation today. So looking forward to that. Before we get into all the things that you're doing now, I just want to give you an opportunity. Give us a little bit of your backstory, and we'll pick the conversation up from there.
Okay, great. Well, I have been in the pageant industry for over 4 decades. So that's sort of where the banner, the whole hair, makeup, all of that comes from. So, I'm kind of surprised. You're surprised I would show up like this. I hope you weren't expecting sweats. I don't own any sweats. Anyway, I'm excited to be here and tell you a little bit more about my story, how Ms. World Traveler came about. I've been to, it's 146 countries now. So been around the world a time or two, and I love to share that with my visitors, followers, and inspire women to travel.
Incredible. Well, and we talked a little bit about my relationship with Mrs. South Dakota International, Charlotte Roop, and, following her journey over the course of last year, not just winning the South Dakota competition, but then going on to the international and seeing what it was really about and what it meant to all of the women that were part of that pageant, and just a whole different world that I got a small peek into, but a very interesting place. And one thing that was common across the board with these women was the impact that they were able to have on their communities, not just at the international and national level, but at their local communities. Obviously, Charlotte is the founder of Operation Combating Veteran Suicide, and that kind of became her platform for doing that. But what does it mean for someone in the pageant industry? What is it that drives some of these women to keep showing up? I mean, some of these people do this, even though it's not maybe making a living, that they do it, it's a 12-month ordeal every year.
It is. It is. And many of them are in it for years and years and years, and they move around to different systems, some with the same system. So, it's a sisterhood. That's probably the main thing that draws women to it. It's a sisterhood. We talk a lot about brotherhood through sports or through military service or whatever, but this is a sisterhood. And so once you are on the inside and you understand what it's like to be out on stage and the lights, and you do it even when your knees are knocking and you're so nervous you can hardly speak, but you do it, that develops a bond. And so the sisterhood is one of the things that draws women to it. The other thing is having a voice. Just like your friend Charlotte, you were just talking about, she has a voice in her community. And that's important to a lot of people. And that's why they want to get involved. It just gives them, one, the motivation, and two, more opportunities, more doors open if you have a title. So I think that those are the two things that really draw women into pageantry, as well as wanting to improve their skills, their speaking skills, their presentation skills, those kinds of things.
Yeah. And as someone who realized the value in community by joining the Midwest Country Music Organization, I also realized over the last year, as being the content creator of the year, what a title can do for you. Being able to introduce myself, hi, I'm Bubba Startz, I have an award-winning podcast, has utterly changed my life. So I can only imagine for some of these women who have wanted to, impact their communities, and were in so many ways, that more doors open when you have a crown and a sash, for whatever reason, right?
Right. Who knows why, but it just does.
That little bit of, I call it juice in my business, right?
Yes,
that you have, right? Well, that people feel somebody else said you were worthy, right?
Yes.
Judges, or for me, it
Yes.
was the members of my community that I had been serving that voted for me in the award show last year. That it's, somebody else said that you're worth it. And then that means so much
Yes.
more to the outward world. I mean, the award
Mhm.
to me personally, because it was voted on by our members, means a lot to me in that personal way. But the award on the mantle doesn't really mean anything also unless you use it and you're out there
That's right.
that and putting that out there.
Yes. It's that sense of feeling worthy, but also that you've been seen, that you're not just toiling in anonymity. People see what you're doing and it's recognized. And there's an internal motivation from that, as well as I think people wanting to grab onto the coattails of success. You say, well, somebody else thinks that is good, so it is good, and therefore I should be part of it.
I use that phrase all the time, toiling in anonymity. And I just, most of it, right? The quiet desperation that people live in. And, for me, 2 years ago, Carrie, I was a welder in a factory and fully living in that. I had always been a performer, a
Really?
songwriter. Had spent, 25 years on stage playing music on the weekends, but it wasn't enough. I wanted my life to leave more of an impact and leave a legacy for my children and my children's children, and not to just kind of, I saw it. I saw a lot of guys around me that were twice my age, still working, and their bodies were broken. I was just like, I can't do this. I don't see myself here in 25 years, right?
Mhm.
Praying for retirement. Like, that's not going to be me. And if I'm going to change it, I need to change it now while I still have a body and an able mind, and I don't have a significant injuries, knock on wood, that were
Mhm.
inhibiting me from doing that, because I also, like
Mhm.
you, have a passion for travel. And now I'm able to bring that passion and my passion for independent music and
Mhm.
conversations now all together into one thing, and to do that. So were you
I think your keyword there is passion. We talk a lot about that. That if you are doing what you are passionate about, it's not really work, even though it is work and you work hard at it. It comes from within, and so the motivation is there. The reward is internal. You're living your dream, and I'm so happy to hear that you left what you were doing to live your dream. Yeah, I mean, isn't that the goal of life? Right? Life is too short to do something that you don't like. I mean, obviously we have to provide for our families and that sort of thing. So that has to be an issue, factor, but it doesn't have to be the whole thing. And so I love that you have followed your passion.
Right. Well, and we talked a little bit off camera about not necessarily being money motivated, but being impact motivated, right? Impact
Yes.
driven to do what we're doing. And I can't imagine living a different life at this point. And now we're very fortunate that we have built a platform that has achieved those certain level of, numbers and outward appearance that people are now gravitating to, that are willing to invest in us, and to invest in it, whether it's advertising or sponsorship, or
Wonderful.
whatever avenue it is, or helping them to do that, a mentorship role that we're kind of finding ourselves in, that we're really grateful to have spent the time necessary to build that platform. Because I think a lot of people do quit, and a lot of people would have quit in our situation, essentially
Right.
taking two
Because you don't
years
jump to the top,
right? No,
right?
exactly.
You have to build, and it takes a while.
Yeah, well, and for me, I knew that to build it, that the timing was right because of the changing media landscape, that if we wanted to do this, it wasn't going to be a slow roll. The time for the slow roll would have been 10 years ago, getting into podcasting and being able to, baby step
Yes.
there. I
Uh-huh.
knew I needed to invest the 60, 70 hours a week that you were, you talked about with your job. At a minimum, I'm working 70 hours a week, right? That it's 7 days a week behind the computer and doing this, and I really have to focus on, like, making sure that I'm taking the time away from working and kind of being on to spend time with the family and invest in them as well, because this doesn't just happen for you. Nobody's coming to save you
That's right.
and to give
That's
it to
right.
you. You have to go build it.
Yeah. And once you've left your steady paycheck, there's no safety net. So it's all on your own back. And the harder the work, the more successful you can become, but based on your own hard.
Yes. So obviously you have a passion for traveling. Was that
Yes.
early on, or was this something that as you were kind of, in your traveling day, obviously with the pageants, I know there's a vast amount of travel involved in that as well. Is it something that you inherited through the work of the pageant, or is it something that you've kind of always had inside of you?
Well, inherited is the right word, but not from pageants, from my mom. My mom had a great wanderlust because her mother had a wanderlust, and she wasn't afraid to just load her kids up in the car and take them anywhere. And so my mom grew up with that, and she did the same for us, my brother and sister and me. So we were very used to road trips and going here and there. And then, as a college graduation present, my mom took me on my first international trip, and from that point, I was addicted. So that's kind of where it really started, my great love of travel, even though I had been doing it on a smaller basis for years before that. And so my mom and I traveled together for about 10 years. And then I really started wanting to, push the boundaries of wanting to do it by myself and travel by myself. And so now I'm a huge proponent of solo travel, especially for women, because we get this, well, want to be lonely, or, I don't know that I can afford it, or, I don't know that I can figure it out. And so we end up having all of these fears about doing it by ourselves. But once you can conquer your fear, just like with anything in life, if you can conquer your fear on something, it gives you confidence. And once you have confidence in one thing, you tend to have confidence in other things. So it's just like a vehicle to become more confident in life by using travel as that stepping stone.
I no different than the pageants are, right? That they're
Very
a
true.
way to build
Very true.
skills, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of cool the parallels between the two things, right? That is exactly
Yes.
what they are confidence builders. And for me, I was very
Yes.
fortunate to have performance, right? Like I wasn't the performer I am today when I took the stage for my first time at 13, 14 years old, right?
Right.
It took a lot of time and effort and practice and watching back and reflecting on choices made. And I think for a lot of female travelers that it's maybe the safety concerns that scare them the
Yes.
most from that. And do what do you do? And I know you have the TV show and you have a lot of these things, that you're sharing in education. At what point did that kind of become your focus to not just do the traveling on your own, but to teach others how to do that? Was there a point where it just clicked, or has it
Yes.
always been something that you've kind of just done? You seem like you're such an educator naturally to mentor that I feel like you kind of came out of the womb this way, but maybe it wasn't that.
Well, that's a good point, but it was a little more channeled toward pageantry. So I've been coaching for almost 25 years and judging. So that sort of mentoring and that sewing into the lives of other young women, that has been going on for a long time. The whole travel thing, Ms. World Traveler came to be in 2022, so not that long ago. But I've been traveling since 1984 was my first overseas trip. So I've been doing it a long time. And it was almost like I knew something big was coming and I didn't know what it was. And I prayed about it and I'm like, okay, is this the new big thing? And I always got sort of the answer, no, this is what you should be doing right now. And so I continued on. And finally in 2022, it was kind of like the scales were removed off my eyes and I could see what Ms. World Traveler was supposed to be, just laid out exactly what it was supposed to be. And I realized that the last 20 plus years had all been preparation for what Ms. World Traveler was going to be. Technology had to be in the right place. You talked about that. Money had to be in the right place. My experience level had to be in the right place. All of these things had to sort of work together, get all the pieces in place first before Ms. World Traveler could happen. So here we are. And now I can talk about a lifetime of experience. It's a little harder to talk about your lifetime of experience when you're young because you don't have enough of a lifetime yet. So now in my 60s, I can look back and I have all of these stories from my travels that I can pass on to help educate other people.
Just incredible. And yes, the brand is so just fully fledged. And I don't think that you're able to get there if this is something that you're kind of piecing together over time. Like you said, you kind of had the entire vision for what it was going to be in the future in the time. And it took that. And I feel that like the last 20 years of my life have all been preparation for the time that I'm in now and to
Nice.
have that available. I'm gonna put some questions on you. I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. Um, Favorite place to visit? 146 countries. Let's just narrow it down. Favorite country to visit?
Ooh. I have different favorites for different reasons. Like favorite place to go shopping would be Paris. Favorite sort of old home feel, London, which I'm leaving next week for London. And the reason I say that is I lived in London after college and went to graduate school there. So that, there's a little bit of an old home feel for me for that. And then I'm actually going to be a month in Australia in March. And I would say Australia and New Zealand are tied for me for friendliness of the people.
Incredible. I have done a little international traveling. I actually lived in Mexico for a year. Yeah, not in like resort Mexico. We were very like off the beaten path. They didn't see
Yeah.
a lot of Caucasian people where we were,
It's
especially.
quite an education, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and then not a lot of people spoke English either, so we really had to.
Uh-huh.
And not having brushed up, I would kind of went down there in a emergency kind of status,
Yeah.
so it wasn't
So
necessarily like, oh, I think
you were
we're gonna move.
immersed.
Yeah.
And that's the way to learn, right? When you just truly get immersed.
It was an experience, and we have some of our just people who absolutely are near and dear to my heart. But I actually, kind of fed the family playing music in the Centro because there was nobody like me doing that. So you talk about,
Uh-huh.
standing out, this white man down performing, singing, American songs, popular American songs at the top of his lungs in the Centro on a Saturday and Sunday was quite the scene. And it's really, it kind of re-sparked a love of music in me,
Mm.
because at the time leading up to that, I wasn't necessarily making great choices in my life, and I wasn't doing what I was put here to do. Right. So it was an amazing time of my life. I hope to do a lot more international traveling. I've visited a lot of the country, and similar to you, that my parents took us on trips all the time. I remember vividly all the trips we took. We grew up in Chicago until I was about 10, both my parents from the south suburbs. So we would take trips to the East Coast when I was younger,
Mhm.
did the Eastern Seaboard, both north and kind of south. My dad went to school in Tennessee, so we took a yearly trip down to, the Blue Ridge Mountains and visited there.
Wonderful.
And the furthest west we had made it, we'd gone out to Washington one time, but we moved to South Dakota when I was a kid and lived there. So a lot of trips, west from that point and going,
Great.
into the Tetons and the mountains. And most of our vacations were in that. And in my 20s, I started, I read Jack Kerouac's On the Road at 18 years old. I was like, wait a minute. Like, I can either sit in this college in freezing cold South Dakota, or I can just like throw my guitar on my back, stick a thumb out, and go tour the West Coast. Now, granted, 1950s, 60s America looked a lot different than, the late aughts, but it was still the courage that it gave me to like, oh, I can go do that. And then you get out and you build that confidence where you're like, no, I don't even need a car. I didn't have a car the entire time I was out there.
Wow.
And I literally
You
went
are
everywhere
brave.
that I wanted to. I'm probably braver than I should be, Carrie, to be perfectly honest. I think it's gotten me into a little bit of, trouble, probably put me in some precarious situations, but also why I'm so confident. And, I'm planning a national tour right now where I'm not just taking myself out, but I'm taking out these other bands and these other people and to say, look, we're going to be okay, right? Like, I promise you, I've done this before, and if I can go around the country in my Suburban, driving, sleeping in rest areas and traveling in that fashion, then I think if we have the security of a tour bus, we're going to be all right. So
Yes.
it's really built. And now for me, I think this is the next 20 years of my life, right? It's taking out.
That sounds super exciting.
I need it. I need
Yeah.
that excitement because I live in a tiny little town in the middle of South Dakota, and most of my life can be very, just kind of mundane, right? And we love our
Mhm.
small town. I don't want to live anywhere else. I've lived in major metro areas. I absolutely despise it. But I like to visit
Mhm.
them, right? I like to go.
Yes, yes.
I like to go and visit for a few days at a time. And once I get stuck in traffic once, I'm pretty much like, all right, I'm over it, you know. So, but I love
Well,
public transit.
what
Go
you were
ahead.
talking about, you know, being from a small town and then you go out and you see, that's very much what Ms. World Traveler does. I am not a digital nomad. I'm not living abroad. I have a home, I have responsibilities, I have my church, I have my friends and family. I want to have a home base. I love to go out and have the adventure and then come back to my home base and refresh, re-energize, take care of responsibilities, and then I'm ready to go back out again. So I get totally what you're talking about, that adventure, there's a time and a place for it. But then you also need that sense of, let me fill my tank back up. Let me get back, recenter myself, and then I'm ready to go again.
Right. Well, because it's necessary. People I don't know, people who haven't traveled, which my wife and her family are very like they vacation, they drive 30 miles down the road to the river and like that's their vacation, right? Mom and dad haven't really they still talk about the one trip they've ever really taken, on a plane going to Vegas in the 90s sometime, right? And I'm like, you could travel a little bit more than that, right?
It's
Take a
okay.
little bit of a vacation. It's okay. But they're farmers, right? Dad has a farm and has responsibilities at home that was just the rhythm of their life. But now that they're kind of getting towards the end and dad's a little bit older, suffered a major injury last year as well that I think kind of flashed before his eyes that he's not the young man that he used to be, and they're definitely towards the end of that that hourglass than at the beginning, that the time is now to, if you want to go do things, you have like the next 5 to 10 years before you're too old to do any of it, right? So
Yeah.
get out and
It's
enjoy life a
precious.
little
Time
bit.
is precious now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, he broke his leg really bad. I mean, to the point where we thought,
Wow.
amputation was on the table at one point. Now fully healed and kind of back to it, but realizing that you're not going to be bouncing around like you did for the last 30 years running this farm and doing all those things, right? Like it's okay to
Right.
slow down. It's okay
Yes.
to, take a vacation and get out and go spend a week somewhere else out of the state. Like we can feed the dog. You don't have, like we can take care of a few animals and not everything has to be done right now. So I hope that I'm able to start to provide a little bit of that in our own way, right? That we can grow
Good.
in our business and to provide that. One thing that sent me away from the job that I was working to was that I was always going to be capped by that income. There was no
Mhm.
getting above what I was making, and what I was making
Right.
was barely enough to give me the life that I wanted to live. I couldn't afford 3, 4 major vacations a year like I want to do. So I had to find,
Mhm.
a way to not just make that money, but to build my world around doing that so that those,
Right.
the things that I like to do are almost paid for by the business, that I don't need to go spend the money that I'm making to do that. And I feel like you kind of
Yes.
encapsulate that a little bit as well, that you've built this brand around the thing that you love to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not a moneymaker, but um it fills my heart, fills my soul, feeds my spirit. And those things are so valuable that it doesn't really matter. I worked, I saved, I have a nest egg, so I'm okay. And now I can take the time to do something that I love to do that again just feeds my soul.
Well, and you see that light, right? Like you see that a lot of people, that are in the, I don't want to say the twilight of their lives, but are further closer to the end than to the beginning, right? That they
Yes.
don't have this light that you have. And would you say that, doing something that you love, I mean, it has to feel like it's extending your life beyond maybe what it would have been had you just stayed committed
Absolutely.
to just making money and doing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was a young girl, I used to picture when people were retired that they would sit on a porch in a rocking chair and, and like look like 95 years old. Well, people to retire at 65, I mean, there's a lot of life left. So that picture that I had was really quite ridiculous. I'm very near retirement age, and I wake up energized every day, love what I do. Retirement is nowhere near in my future. I'm going to do it until my body gives out, or I just have to slow down, or, whatever it is. But I love it so much that I think that's what keeps people young, the effervescence, the joy of life that keeps
Exactly.
you going.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
spice of life that keeps us going. And yeah, you give me so much motivation to keep doing exactly what I'm doing. Cause I get a lot of people that comment on me, when I mention I'm almost 40, they're like, I did not assume that about you. Like you still have so much to so much energy all the time. And it's like, well, because I am very passionate about what I do every day, and I could
Mhm.
see that I've always been this inside, but outwardly I wasn't this even 2-3 years ago, just kind of stuck in this factory, not really seeing not seeing a future that I really wanted to be a part of. And now everything has changed so drastically, and you give me so much more courage to keep doing what we're doing to chase that, because the same as you, I didn't start working until I was in my 30s, so I don't have a retirement nest egg to lean on anyway. So if I'm going to be working till I'm 75 or 80 years old, then I might as well be doing something that I enjoy doing.
Something that you love. Absolutely.
Well,
Gives you
Carrie,
joy, but also gives you energy.
exactly. Carrie, where can everybody find you and follow
Oh,
you
yeah.
and
Yeah,
find your channel and everything? Go ahead and plug
we
away.
would love to have people come along for the ride. So we're on YouTube. Ms. World Traveler is it's a YouTube series, and we go all over the world. And it's a little bit different than what other people are doing. We focus a little bit more on style, fashion, art, design, culture, history, that sort of thing. So there's not a lot of where should you eat, where should you stay, because there's thousands of people out there doing that. So come along for the ride, because you'll see something and hear something different. And that's at YouTube, Ms. World Traveler, Ms. World Traveler. We're also on Instagram, Kerry, Ms. World Traveler. That's Kerry, Kerry, Ms. World Traveler. We're also on Kerry, Ms. World Traveler.
Fantastic. Well, Carrie, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. This was a lovely conversation. I will be following the YouTube channel because that sounds like some amazing content that I would be absolutely in love with watching on a regular basis. So thank you for
Appreciate it.
being part of the show today. And thank you for being part of the scene.
You're welcome.